Everyone thought we were crazy for moving to Mexico.
And they thought we were crazy for moving back to the U.S.
So I guess we're just
Crazy.
crazy. Learned after 3 years in Mexico. You want to start from the beginning?
So we started in Florence, Arizona, and we bought our dream house after we got married.
Literal dream house. Beautiful, brand new, huge house, pool, hot tub, all of the nice things.
All the amenities we wanted, we found when we bought this house. The neighborhood we lived in,
So you want to tell them about the neighborhood?
where we lived, was Florence, Arizona, which is centrally located, but it's a prison town. And our neighbors were either law enforcement or ex-inmates. And it really wasn't it wasn't really a great environment for a mixed couple to live in. So we picked a few countries and we basically flipped a coin at the end. So we didn't want to get too far away. And we were just, dipping our toes in the water and seeing what it was like to live in a different country.
We looked at Portugal, Spain. There were a lot of countries on our list, but Mexico checked all the boxes and it was still close enough to where we could get back and visit Aunt Natalie. And if we needed to get back to the States for any reason, it would be really easy.
We kept our daughter's neurologist in the States so that we could continue her care there. So that was very important to us as that was one of the main reasons why we chose Mexico.
Until we got to Mexico and realized that we didn't need to keep our doctors here. But a small expat area and decided to move to Punta Banda in Baja California, which is about 40 minutes south of Ensenada.
So for me getting ready to move, I learned a little bit more Spanish than I knew, which was very little. And even once we moved, I knew very little. But but what I did do that was to our benefit, as I learned the monetary system and how it worked. But I knew the numbers, and that was very, very important, especially when we first moved there.
We sold everything that we owned, and when I say everything, I mean it was
9 totes.
We had 9 totes that fit in the back of the van, and that was everything that we owned. So we had a nice chunk of change from selling all of our belongings, which gave us a little bit of a cushion when we moved. And I'm glad we did that because it actually ended up being way more expensive than we thought it was going to be. So it was just, there was a lot of extra expenses we weren't expecting. So I'm glad that we sold everything and had that cushion.
Yeah, it really did help us out a lot. So when we first arrived in Mexico, where did we stay when we first got there?
When we first got to Mexico, we stayed in an Airbnb, and that's something that I highly recommend if you are going to a different country to secure a short-term rental. So 1 month, 3 months, something like that, rather than signing a 12-month lease, sight unseen especially. But our Airbnb was about 3 times as much for a month of rent as the last house we lived in before we moved back to the States.
A couple of things. One, make sure you have a cushion if you're going to move to another country. And definitely stay there short term. Get to know the area. Get to know different locations where you can stay so you can actually make a better educated guess on where you would like to stay. And I say guess because there's only so much research you can do without actually living there. But you can do that research up front and it will help your transition go a lot smoother.
The Airbnb house was interesting. It was
a great introduction to what it's like to live in Mexico in downtown Ensenada.
Yeah, so I had never been to Mexico except for a very short cruise and stop at the port in Ensenada.
That's another story. We'll have to tell them about that.
Yes, our first fake honeymoon. But yeah, it was different than I expected from the pictures. There were a lot of pictures that made everything look a lot different than what it was when we got there. After the Airbnb, we found a house on the beach, the Marisol house.
So we both loved the Marisol house. Sadie loved the colors. Like they were like it was painted traditional Mexican motif, I guess it would be called.
Very bright and colorful and
Right.
just amazing. And you could hear the waves crashing at night.
Yeah, the location was amazing. We were right on the beach. Out our front door was the sand. So
we could see the dolphins jumping in the water from our kitchen. It was the most amazing house that I've ever lived in.
So why did we decide to move from another amazing location?
So that's a loaded question, babe. We moved from the Marisol house because we realized pretty quickly when we moved in that we didn't fit in there at all.
So one of the reasons we moved to Mexico is because of how people treated me because of my skin color. So once we got to Mexico and we moved to an expat area, I was still treated the same way, even though we were in a different country.
But it was by the people from the U.S.
Correct.
Let's be clear there.
Right.
We definitely need to talk about the culture and how locals treated us versus...
We'll do that in another video. We'll make a whole video about that.
Yeah. When we moved in and we noticed some of the neighbors wearing the red hats, we knew that we were not amongst friends, for lack of a better term. We were amongst people from the U.S. and I would say Americans, but Mexico is in America too. So we're differentiating by just saying people in the U.S., people from the U.S.
Right.
Just the beach was amazing, but the vibe of the people was just something that we couldn't stand, if I'm being frank.
We had a few other locations that we moved to, and then we found another amazing location in a local community. It was actually on the side of a mountain, about 3 roads up from the main road.
Really, when we were able to learn to love and enjoy Mexico the way that I feel like we really wanted to from the beginning, because a lot of expats, they will move to Mexico and then try to recreate the U.S., all of the gated communities that made you feel safe, but really, if somebody wants to get in, they're going to get in. The gated communities don't provide anything other than creating a bubble to be around other people that look like you instead of enjoying the local culture.
Right.
Yellow House was our last house in Mexico before we moved back to the States. Beautiful house and had fast internet, had a gorgeous view, and we got to feed all the street dogs.
And families. We actually fed about 100 families every Saturday. So that was good for our heart, our soul, and it's something that we feel that we're driven to do as a family.
But the best part about that is, like, I learned to be okay speaking Spanglish, because when you come from the U.S., if anyone has an accent, people automatically treat them as if they're, like, lesser than. Yeah, right. Not speaking perfect English, and you'll hear, oh, learn English, speak English, all these things, and people are treated like crap for not knowing one of the most complex, difficult languages to learn in the whole world. But in Mexico, it's different.
Most people who've been around us when we're in the States, when we hear how they treat other people who English is their second language, or even if English is their first language but they came from a different country, that's our experience that we're sharing. One thing in Mexico, they're very, very friendly and very forgiving of your Spanish. They're happy that you're learning Spanish and trying to communicate in their language so that they can better understand what your needs are, what you want, and what you're the thought process you're trying to get across. But we were able to not just survive, but thrive in that environment. I was very happy that we could find people to practice Spanish with, and that everywhere we went, people were willing to help us understand what we were trying to say in Spanish. I got corrected a lot, but not corrected in a malice or a bad way. I was corrected just so people would go, "Oh, I understand what you're saying. Say it this way next time." Like, it was very helpful, very friendly. To me, that was amazing. You do find that in some places in the US, in like small towns, but usually in bigger cities you don't. And we lived, like Sadie said, about 40 minutes south of Ensenada. Even going into Ensenada, you would see people on the side of the road just helping other people out, just helping people. It was amazing, and that was one of the many reasons why we loved living there.
You love driving in Mexico.
I
It's like
do.
Mario Kart.
In Mexico, when you drive, there are rules to the road, just like there are in any country. In Mexico, to me, things just made more sense. If there was an intersection, you stopped. If you got there first, you went. If you didn't, you let the cross traffic go. That's a rule here in the US, but people come to stop signs and they don't know who's supposed to go next. And it happens a lot here, where there it's just intuitive. And it's intuitive driving there. So if you're gonna merge, they know how to zipper.
We're going to talk about some of the things we didn't love so much during our time in Mexico, just because I don't want you guys to think that it's all sunshine and rainbows just because we loved it and are going back.
So one of the downsides to living in the area we lived in Mexico were the roads. Anytime it rained, even when it didn't rain, big giant potholes. Most of the roads in our area were dirt, not paved. The main road was paved, but all of the side roads were dirt roads.
And even the paved part of the road wasn't like paved the same way as it is in the US. Like, it's just completely different infrastructure where we were at in Baja California. I'm autistic, so I get overstimulated very easily, and that can come from smells, it can come from sounds. In Mexico, not only are there different smells, there are lots of sounds.
You mean like the dogs barking?
No, I mean like the roosters crowing all day long.
Oh. Yeah, there are the roosters too.
And all of the parties every weekend until 4 a.m.
But I love listening to the music.
There's just a lot of noises. I wore my headphones a lot. I still wear my headphones a lot, so it wasn't specific to Mexico, but it is something to be aware of because it was just part of the joy of living there. It was part of, the ambiance. But when you first get there,
it can be overstimulating, and it can be a shock.
Yeah.
Like a culture shock. So let's talk about the street dogs.
Where we lived, there were a lot of dogs, and they came to us for food. So we had a ritual every morning. We would wake up, go outside, feed all the dogs. We took all the dogs to the vet, got them dewormed, defleed, all the things, cleaned them up, took them to the groomer, all kinds of awesome stuff. But there were always so many dogs, like we couldn't keep up. We were spaying and neutering them. We were doing everything we could to try and help, but nobody there really seemed to care about spaying and neutering their dogs, even though there were different, community resources for it. There were shelters that would help.
There were just more dogs than we had resources for to help try to stem the problem.
So that was probably the hardest part for me living in Mexico, was seeing all the starving dogs and not being able to feed all of them. One of those things at night, whenever you go to sleep and you think about all the dogs out in the streets and how they're not getting fed or taken care of. But we did take 2 of the dogs from Mexico, and they now live with us in our beds. Daisy and Zorro. We'll have to show them to you sometime.
Yes, we will. So, babe, why did we move back to the U.S.?
We moved back to the U.S. because, well, my only defense is temporary insanity.
We wanted to buy land. It's easier to buy land in the U.S. than it is in Mexico. And it seems like it's safer for Americans to buy land in the U.S.
And by safer, we mean legally, paperwork type safer. Not Mexico's scary. Safer.
Another reason we came back is so that we could hustle. Living there was like living a retired lifestyle. We both got in. We both were very comfortable. We were helping lots of people. We were feeding people. We were helping the dogs. We were doing the things that we really felt that we were led to do, but we wanted to do more. And wanting to do more, we had to increase our income, and to do that, we had to get back into hustle mode. We tried to do it while we were there, but we realized that living in that environment, we felt really relaxed, really comfortable, and we were retired. So we came back so that we could change our mindset. We knew that getting into a different environment would help both of us change our mindset so that we could get into that hustle mode.
With that being said, it is possible we could have stayed there and hustled. I just had a really hard time. I think we both had a really hard time getting into the hustle mindset when the ocean's right there and he could go fishing. When it's perfect weather, why are you going to stay inside and hustle on the computer when the ocean is calling your name? So it was, and then the dogs were there all day, every day. I would much rather go outside and play with the dogs. And so we just really were not able to activate hustle mode there the way we wanted to. And also, you can't do like in-person hustles in the same way. Now that we're back, Kevin's driving for Uber. We're doing different things to make money in person. We did some vendor events. Never again. But we're doing everything we can to make more money so we can eventually donate more money, because we did it a little backwards. We started taking care of too many people
too
fast, and now we have to take care of ourselves and stack that retirement.
So the other reason we came back is because of our daughter, right?
Yeah, so Sapphire, she just turned 18, and for the past year or so, she was talking about how she wanted to come back to the States. She missed the conveniences. She missed the, ordering and going to Panera and just little things here and there. And also being able to fully communicate with everybody while she was out and about. Because though she does understand Spanish for the most part and speaks it fairly well.
Better than we do.
Yes. She isn't fluent. And speaking to kids her age when she didn't know Spanish, it was nearly impossible. So for about a year, she was talking about how she wanted to come back to the U.S. We finally worked really hard to make that happen. And then
she wants to go back to Mexico.
Almost as soon as we arrived in Yuma, she was like, "What were you thinking?"
I want to go back to Mexico.
So she didn't really understand all that went into moving here, the thousands of dollars to pay a mover. That's a story for another video.
Yeah, that's a story.
So we're now making the best of what we have created. We purchased a house. We're making double mortgage payments on it so we can pay it off as quickly as possible. We're hustling up. Well, he's hustling up. I'm still doing my passive income pathways, and that takes up a lot of my time during the day. And then we're starting this video channel.
So we have goals. This is what we mean by living the smiley lifestyle. It's like no matter what situation you're in, make the best of it. Remember what your goals are, and then continue to go for them. It doesn't matter. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be side steps.
The cha-cha slide.
We want to make sure that you continue to move forward and move towards your goals, and we will continue to do the same thing.
Now, we do want to talk about the good parts about living in Yuma, Arizona.
So what are good points for you for living in Yuma?
I like living in Yuma because it is centrally located. I love that we are closer to San Diego than we are to Phoenix or Tucson. It's literally a 2.5-hour drive straight through the mountains. Very nice drive to get to San Diego from Yuma. We're also only 11 miles from the Mexico border, and it's only about an hour and 15 minutes to Mexicali.
So that is one of my favorite things as well, because we can get to Mexicali or Ensenada without it being a whole day thing. Like I can go down there and come back in a day. So that's one of the biggest perks for me for living here in Yuma.
Another good thing about living in Yuma is the weather.
So Yuma is the sunniest place on earth.
And it does get hot, don't get me wrong, but I love the summer and I love the winter.
So, speaking about the summer, gotta have a pool.
Yeah, I love that we have a pool too.
I love the food. I love that it's so close to the border that you can get authentic Mexican food on this side of the border as well.
Love that here in Yuma, we are 10 minutes from, or less, from literally everything. Doctor's appointments, all kinds of different restaurants, places to go shopping, the movie theater, and they're in English, so I can actually understand the movies here.
So they did have a theater in Ensenada that played movies in English, but it was at midnight.
And my bedtime is like 7 p.m.
So another thing about here is the variety of foods that you can get, the variety of restaurants. In Mexico where we lived, every restaurant was Mexican food. Kind of makes sense, I guess.
There were a few. There were sushi places, pizza places,
Yeah.
but it's different.
But right, it's different, and it was like that in India as well. Like a lot of the restaurants, you see a lot of the restaurants.
India's chicken.
A lot of the restaurants have the same name. Like you'll see KFC, but it's not the same chicken as you get at KFC in the U.S. So being back in Arizona, being in Yuma, you get a variety. We can try a variety of different foods, and it's just different because in Ensenada where we were, you try a variety of different foods, but after a while, at least for Sadie, it all starts to taste the same, and she didn't really like much of it.
Kevin loved all of the food. We'll do a whole video about that. But
oh yeah, I love to eat. So, and I love trying different. I like different flavor profiles. I like trying different foods and having different things go on. So I love the Indian food from when we were in India. I love the Mexican food when we were in Mexico. I love the food that we get while we're here.
I also love that we can go to places like there's a Panera opening soon. I love going places to work, bringing my laptop to a cafe to work, and there weren't very many opportunities to do that in or around Ensenada.
Right. I think we found one coffee shop that we could actually go and work at, and that was after being there a year, and the lady opened up another side of her store.
Yeah, it had just opened up before we were leaving. So it's growing, and it's great that the area is growing, but for me, like, I really love that Yuma's already so established and has all of these places. And last but certainly not least, one of the best parts about living here in Yuma, Arizona is the fusion of cultures.
Yeah, I love that you can get the mix of different cultures here. There's a huge, of course, since we're close to the border, there's a huge Mexican presence here. So that helps us feel a little bit.
Makes it feel more like home, because to us, Mexico is home. We're making the best of a, how do you say, big mistake?
I don't think it was a mistake to move here. Just like I said, it was a sideways thing.
Yeah, something like that.
You really think it was a mistake? Like, honestly?
I wish that I could hustle in Mexico. I wish that I could have turned my brain to that mode and made it work in Mexico, because we're making more money online now than we were there, and I could have done the same thing there. I just couldn't make it happen, and I miss Carmen so much. I wish that we would have stayed, and I wish I could have made it work, but my brain just wouldn't cooperate. You go into the donut shop to order a donut, and the cashier might be speaking to you in Spanish or Spanglish, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it helps us to keep learning Spanish. It keeps Spanish in the forefront of our mind, and we can continue to learn and grow while we're here, while we have the conveniences of living in the U.S. So that is a very important perk for living here in Yuma, Arizona.
And a lot of the people here, it's so funny to see them. We'll have to do a video on this too. It's so funny to see when we try to speak Spanish back to them or speak Spanish to them at all. Sometimes people are confused. A few times people refuse to speak Spanish to us at all.
Yeah.
And then other times they're like so happy that we're speaking Spanish. Our favorite waitress at Golden Corral, we absolutely love her, and whenever she comes to speak to us, she speaks to us only in Spanish because
Right.
she knows that we like to practice. So it's really cool to get like I said, that kind of fusion of cultures. You still get to interact, whereas when we lived here before, the area we lived in, while there was a Hispanic population, you didn't go to the store and speak Spanish with anyone really.
Right.
And everything was kind of like divided up. Here it's like we're all mixed together.
Yeah, you get more of that true melting pot that the US is supposed to be. At least I feel that way.
Yeah, I think so too.
So that's our story from that first crazy idea from us moving to Mexico.
Through 3 amazing years there, and now back in Arizona, we are here to plan our next chapter and share it with you in real time.
You know what we learned? Sometimes the craziest choice turns out to be the smartest one that you'll ever make.
Living in Mexico changed our lives for the better in so many ways. And we want to encourage you to take that leap and move to a different country if that's what you're wanting. How many times have you sat around and said, oh, I wish I could leave the U.S.? Well, you can, but you don't get there by wishing. So we hope that us sharing our journey with you will inspire you to make those big moves, even when they feel crazy.